So we are live streaming this event on the Molonglo Valley Facebook page, so hello to those watching at home. Technology is on our side this evening, but if we do have any technical challenges, please just bear with us. These videos will be uploaded to the Suburban Land Agency website tomorrow. Thank you to those residents who sent through questions for tonight. These questions and interests have shaped the content of this evening's event. We have invited a number of guest presenters to talk through the topics that you are interested in. They're all sitting over there very keen to begin. The presenters will aim to answer all of the questions to the best of their knowledge, but understandably might not have an answer to all questions right now. Where needed, it is reasonable to expect that some questions will be noted and followed up after tonight's event. Due to the number of topics we have, limited time for each presentation, and we do ask that you hold all questions until question time. Our staff are monitoring the online feedback, which we endeavour to answer as well. If your question, if your question is unable to be answered immediately, we will aim to respond to your question ASAP. Our presenters have been briefed to keep the presentations on time so we can get through all of the topics. If I do cut questions and answers short, it is because we want to ensure as many of you have your topics covered as possible. And of course, at the end of the presentations and the open question time, our presenters will be available to talk to you at the tables around the room for additional questions. A survey, we really appreciate community feedback regarding events such as this, and we are asking for 2 minutes of your time to complete a survey on Facebook or via email relating to this evening's event. We hope you enjoy the presentations tonight, and I would like to begin by introducing John Dietz, CEO of Suburban Land Agency. Thank you, John.
That's okay. I'm just going to go before John because he'll be able to give you a bit more information and introduce some of the other speakers. My name's Yvette Berry. I'm the Minister for the Suburban Land Agency, and I wanted to begin as well tonight by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land, the Ngunnawal people, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge and welcome any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who are here with us tonight. This is my very first Molonglo Valley Community Information Night, but not my first Molonglo Mingle event. I moved into Dunlop 18 years ago, and we never had anything like this as a new resident in Dunlop. So I'm pretty impressed with how the Suburban Land Agency and the Mingle program has been building a strong community out here in the Molonglo Valley, more than just bricks and mortar. And so I've been happy to be part of it and to learn from the community about how we can do better as a government and as a Suburban Land Agency. It's only 12 months old, to do even better for as we build Canberra. So my job is to make sure through the Suburban Land Agency that they design and develop suburbs and sell the land to private or commercial buyers for a specific purpose. Now, I understand out here, and I've had some correspondence from some of you, and I've visited and heard from some of your neighbours in Wright around the frustration on the Coombs Shopping Centre, or the lack of the Coombs Shopping Centre. And so I've asked John Dietz from the Suburban Land Agency and the planning team to have a look at how we could possibly learn a bit more about what's been happening here as far as planning's concerned, what we could do, if anything, right now, but also what we can do in the future. Some of you might already know the status of the shopping centre. The developer... I'll just go here. She's going to give me a petty. I understand from the shopping centre that his statutory time frame for completion of the facility is April 2019 to have that completed. But of course, after that, whether or not he can get tenants into his shopping centre is another question, and there's not a lot the government can do as far as fining or forcing the shopping centre owner to have tenants in there by the April timeframe when the building's required to be completed. We did ask, the Suburban Land Agency did ask for the Coombs shop developer to come along tonight. Unfortunately, he was unable to come along. Okay. Anyway, of course, this has been quite an unforeseen circumstance for the government. Usually, a developer who builds a shopping centre wants to get it tenanted pretty quick smart and completed quick smart, because it's basically they're going to be part of a community for a very long time while they own that shopping centre, and I imagine they'd be wanting to make money out of the rent from tenants on that site. So, as I said, this is a bit of a unique circumstance for the government and for a community. So we're trying to work our way through it and how we can make improvements in the future around requirements for tenancies, because it's never been required to happen before. It's just quite unusual. But in the meantime, what I've also asked the Suburban Land Agency in the Mingle program to do is to talk with the community and see how we could encourage maybe a pop-up cafe in the meantime, if that's something that the community would be happy to get around, because of course there's no point in a pop-up cafe setting up out here somewhere if it's not going to be viable for their business. So I've asked them to have a chat with you and the Mingle program, and perhaps operators who might be interested in setting up out here. I remember, back like 20, 30 years ago in Dunlop, there was a little caravan out there, and I've seen it out at Taylor. People have set up off their own accord. But if the Suburban Land Agency can find out ways that we can encourage something out here for you to gather around and support, and somewhere you can meet and get together, then I think that would be a great way forward in the meantime, until we can try and encourage the developer to tenant his shops for everybody else. There's been a lot happening out here. Of course, there's a new Coombs Health Co-op. The school's a great place, although I note it is warm in here tonight. So I will, as Education Minister, talk to the Education Directorate about the airflow in this place. I know it's a sustainable school and that's important, but there needs to be some comfort here as well. So know that I will follow that up from my own experiences here. And I also know that the developer of the community hall has made contact with the Planning Directorate to finalise arrangements around the use of that hall. So some really great things happening out here, and of course the Mingle program and Stromlo Cottage doing their very best to bring people together, and the Diwali event that's coming up this weekend, if you haven't heard about it, and I hope you're able to get along to it. Now I'm going to be here for a little while, but not for the entire night, but I'll be here for the question and answer session. So I'll do my best, and John and the others are going to help out with answering questions as well. So now I'm going to ask John to come up, the much better looking one, and to have a chat with you. Shall I just...
So that's the... Thanks very much, Minister. We really do appreciate you coming here tonight. I can assure you that when the Minister talks of her expectations for the Suburban Land Agency, they're very much around people-inclusive communities and optimising the balance between social, financial and environmental outcomes. But they're not just words. When the Minister says them, she says them with real integrity. And I also know this because when we don't get it right, it is one of the things that's absolutely high on the agenda when I have a regular catch-up with the Minister. And I can say that the Coombs Shops Local Centre here has received its fair share of airtime for the months since I've joined the SLA. So I can also assure you that it's not always that the Minister's available for a night like tonight. So having us both here is a real reflection of our keenness to listen, our understanding and our hearing of the concerns, but also that we acknowledge that the current situation is not optimal. and that something's gone wrong along the way that we need to fix and to see what we can do to verify. I can assure you that when it was sold, when the site out at Coombs Local Centre was sold 4 years ago, it wasn't anyone's intention or anyone's belief that 4 years later it still wouldn't be developed. It was definitely the understanding that within about 3 years, a developer would have developed. The population of Coombs would probably be some 3,000 to 4,000 people, and it would be a truly running local centre by now. Now, I don't have to tell you that we're a good year after that. There's probably another 1,000 people here, and there's still no local centre. So I do feel that when situations like this occur, it is important that someone like myself, in a position of responsibility and accountability, is able to stand up and come and speak to people like yourselves so that we can hear and we can listen. I can attempt to relay some of the concerns and also some of the things that we're trying to do to either fix or rectify the situation in the short term, but also then actually look at some of the learnings that we reflect on this particular case so that we can reduce the probability that something like this happens in the future. So I think you've all seen the slide in front of me. It's just a high-level view of the main commercial hub, which is where John Gorton Drive, Fred Daly and Steve Irwin Avenue meet. So some of the things that are occurring there just organically through the master planning and the working of the master plan that I just wanted to keep you across. You'd all know the position of the local centre. Well, just across adjacent to that is a block of land which was sold to another developer. They're planning for something called Coco Molonglo. We have invited Peter Vanderwalt here. He's the planner for the Coco Molonglo. Peter will be presenting just after myself to give you an idea of what that development is looking to be like. I do think that in many ways it is providing some of what we would have hoped could be provided through the local centre. So that's one of the good things that is happening, but I recognise also that they're just in the process of lodging their DA now. So by the time an actual supermarket or cafe is ready, available and in operation is still years away. I also note just around the area, very, very recently up at Stromlo Forest Park, there's a new handlebar, which is a cafe, which I think is open on Wednesday nights and Friday nights and Saturday and Sunday. Their idea is to sell both coffee but also liquor when they have their liquor licence. So it's a good development. The Denman Prospect team, they're here tonight. I've seen Nick and Eva around. They'll be talking a little bit about some of the things that are happening there. And I also make note that the Coombs shops, as the Minister said, essentially the building is now complete. They have a certificate of occupancy for most of the building, which would allow a tenant to come in and actually occupy now. What they haven't yet got is a certificate of occupancy for the supermarket area. I understand their plan there is to wait until they actually have a tenant who can help them with how they want to operate that, so that the last parts of laying the concrete, etc., can be put in place before they go for a certificate of occupancy. Which is, we're not relying on that, but at least it shows it's actually pretty close if they can find a tenant. But as the Minister said, this is an issue that we, the Suburban Land Agency, sold the land, so yes, we are very much responsible for the outcome. We're looking to see what sort of things we can do to help in the meantime. And one idea is a pop-up cafe. Now, we've actually learnt quite a bit about pop-up cafes here in Stromlo, and I think the idea of one that was to be moving around perhaps isn't so good. What we do understand are things like it needs to be dependable, you need to know where it's going to be, you need to know the operation hours of the cafe, you need to know what sort of services it can provide, and it needs to be in a location which is beneficial for both the community and the operator. We're definitely looking to go through that process to see if we can entice an operator into this area for Coombs for the interim period until something like Coco Molonglo or the Coombs Shopping Centre is up and running. Our process to go through with that, I can't guarantee an outcome, but I can guarantee a process. And I think the first part of that process would be to consult with yourselves to understand where the best location is. I would think, following the master plan, the best location is the intersection where the commercial hub is. And it's, if you look at, if you look at that particular site there. So the site that is in between the local shopping centre and or close to where the school is, the one that's across the road from the local Coombs shopping centre towards the school. That's a site which is still owned by government. It's not in the indicative land release program for at least a few years. It is possible we could set some sort of a container, operator out of a container, operator out of a caravan, operator out of a trailer, which could operate from that area and service the community for things like coffee, perhaps things like sandwiches. If it was seen beneficial, maybe even milk and bread. That's a possibility. Also another possibility is the cottage, the historic cottage that we have out at Stromlo. Operationally, that's actually pretty easy for us to do. It's already got electricity. It would be quite easy to get an operator to come in and just plug a van in there. But we wanted to come out to yourselves. Our Meagle team have already drafted up some questions for a survey, which will mature over the next few days, but I'm really keen for you to have a chat with them later in the evening. To understand, firstly, what sort of operational hours, which location would be most beneficial, things like what sort of services you would benefit from it. These sorts of information we would then use to educate a tender process that we would put out. It would be an open tender to see if there are interested parties who would then like to come and actually operate from that area. We would look to do things to make sure that there was electricity provided, etc. I can't guarantee that that's going to have a perfect outcome, but I can guarantee we will follow that process through and evaluate the results. So that's something that we are looking definitely to do. Essentially starting as of tonight, we'll start the discussion. I also just make note that the Stromlo cottage itself and the increased activation of that cottage is something for the community to really take advantage of as well. It's definitely up and running. The next thing I noted that it was important for me to say about the issue of today and the things that we're looking to try and rectify or lessen the outcome of that issue. But it's also important to reflect as a major learning on perhaps what went wrong and how we can ensure that doesn't go wrong for future land sites in future suburbs or even in this particular suburb. And I guess when you look at the release methodology, the land release policy that the government land organisation had in the past, in this particular case, going out to auction hasn't ended up in a great outcome. In many other cases, going out to auction has. It has absolutely ended up in a fantastic option. But what we're looking and working through with our board and with the Minister is a sales release methodology that can repeatedly come up with the right outcome. And in doing that, we look at things like, is the particular site, has it got special circumstances? Is it the first of a particular site? Is it the last of a particular site? Is it next to something which is really important? Is it one of a kind, like a local centre in an upcoming suburb? And if it is, maybe we become a lot more prescriptive in the permitted uses that we have for that site. And the second issue then is, once we have attuned to that, then we look at what sort of methods we should go to market to actually release it. And we do have an array of different methods at our disposal, going from auction at one end through perhaps a pre-qualified auction where you can ensure that the people allowed to vote to actually bid in that auction have been pre-qualified with both their experience and their understanding and their completed projects to date. We can go through expressions of interest. We can go through requests for proposal. We can go through tenders where the evaluation criteria of that tender actually does use things like experience, uses things like what sort of design are you going to put forward, what sort of tenants are you planning to have within that criteria. So there's some of the things that we're now looking at. We're maturing a policy through my board and with guidance from the Minister. It will end up in a set of guidelines to my team that when we go out and we sell these types of blocks, then we're really considering an appropriate release methodology to ensure we get the best outcome.
Okay. Hi, I'm Peter van der Walt. I am a local planner in town, working for a company called Canberra Town Planning. I recognise a number of faces in the audience tonight. I'm sure people at home that have seen me before. Our firm has worked on a number of the proposals and the development that's been developed in the Molonglo area over the years, and it's quite a pleasure to stand in front of you tonight and talk about Cocoa Molonglo. The site we're talking about, I think we all know where it is, on the corner of John Gorton Drive and Irving Avenue. About a 1.5 hectare site. It's one of the biggest sites in the valley. It's quite prominent right in the middle. As John said, it is part of the commercial hub. It is zoned for mixed-use commercial uses. The site was sold some time ago. The owners that bought the site are developers, they're local developers. They've been working in Canberra for a long time. They're also commercial developers. They not only run small shopping centres, they also own, or not only own, but they run small shopping centres. They build supermarkets, they run supermarkets. They understand what is needed in the planning around this. And they've amassed a team of really good professionals to work on the site to try and do something that is that fits in the area, what is needed by the community, but also for their development aspirations. I didn't prepare a fancy presentation. What I've done is grab the documents that we presented to the community on the 13th of September when we had a night out at the school. Came and presented a proposal and said, this is what we want to do, please give us your comments. About 54 people turned up at the night. There were some really interesting discussions, and I think we felt quite happy at the end of the night that we've managed to address most people's questions, and I will be here not only now but at the end of the evening to address any more comments or questions that people have. It's a large site, and we're proposing to use every bit of that as we can to develop this mixed-use precinct for the area. We are proposing a site that will be built over stages. Stage 1 is just about ready to be presented to the Planning Authority. On the slides in front of you, I've got a ground floor plan, and as I click through the slides, it might be a little bit complex, but it's important to keep in mind that the site falls from the southwestern corner about 9 metres to John Gorton Drive. So we've got in the ground about 3 levels, and then we start building from that level up higher. We set the development at the John Gorton Drive level, and then we dig into the hill a big hole, and that hole will become a car park undercover that is on the same level of which will be our commercial precinct. You can see in the middle a large area therein which will be a 1,500 square metre supermarket. We have already had interest for the use of the space. We've got another 5 commercial tenancies at the moment in planning, loading dock facilities that would be housed within the building with a roller door, so we can keep all the noise, the amenity and all that contained, but service these shops the way they should be served so they can deliver their service to the community as they need. Although we show a layout for commercial, we haven't finalised that. We are working with a number of people that are interested in this development, and we will reset the internal layout thereof to work with the people that want to go into this area. It is quite important to not just pick every lease as they come through the door, but curate the commercial operators in this space, and a lot of that will sit around who the ultimate supermarket tenant is. Some supermarket groups works better with smaller specialities than others. So at the moment we are taking expressions of interest, and we're working with people's aspirations in operating from this space. But until such time as we finalise who the commercial operator of the supermarket would be, we would like to keep our powder dry so we can get the right mix of uses to service not only the centre but also the community. Car parking is really important, and having convenient car parking on the same level at the front door of the supermarket in this space is really important for us. So you can see we will basically digging out and hollowing out the site so we can have car parking undercover, really good space, well lit, out of the rain, so that if you want to visit the shops, you can conveniently do so. Stepping one level up, you'll see the ground floor of this space is over the commercial, which is on the John Gorton side, is elevated. So we have the ground floor from the floor to the ceiling will be higher. That allows us to get the services into the roof for the commercial and the supermarkets. That's ventilation and the like. The car parking will be covered across the site with a commercial lid, and we will allow those areas to be built with other users. In some of our initial work that we've done, there was a very strong indication for us that people said, this is a really large site and we actually want you to not build the whole thing in one go, because as the suburb develops and the community matures, our needs is likely to change. What we think we may need on day one is not what we will ultimately need 3 or 4 years down the track. So we said that kind of worked quite well with our program, in that we will start with setting the site up in the way that works. We'll deliver the car parking, get the supermarket and our initial stage going, and we'll keep 3 sites at the back of the site reserved at the moment. So as the suburb evolves, that we can respond. So we have 3 sites sitting towards the southwestern part of the site. The one on Steve Irving at the moment can be a plethora of uses that's permitted under the Crown lease. To the south is probably more likely to be a commercial or residential offering. And then we've got a site right in the back corner that at the moment is being set up for a drive-through type service. So whether it's food or the like, we don't know at the moment, but we make sure that the access to the site can allow that to operate as a drive-through arrangement in the future. When the land was sold, access to the site was allowed primarily from the service line of John Irving and around the rear of the site. No access was contemplated of Steve Irving. We looked at that and thought that doesn't really work in the way we want to run the centre, and we had some concern that for people, it's a big site and it'll have a lot of activity on it, and if we're forcing people to engage with the site from the rear, it's likely that they would find their way through the suburbs to and away from the shop. Saying it differently, if you're coming down John Gorton Drive, you see the shops and you turn up Steve Irving, you have to drive all the way around the back of the site to access it. Wouldn't it be much better if we can use the roundabout that's just up the hill in Steve Irving for access into the site? And we got the traffic engineers working quite hard to resolve that, and we've managed to get an engineering solution that will allow an access that will allow us to drop into the site to the lower level where the parking is, but then allow us to build the buildings at street level, so we don't have car parks facing the road. We actually got buildings and activity. We are proposing on John Gorton Drive an 8-storey building that will sit with a high ceiling commercial space and residential on top. The Crown lease allow 158 dwellings on the site, and we have set them out in a U shape with the majority of those facing northeast onto John Gorton Drive and over the valley. It's quite important on the sketch that I'll show you now. You'll see the building steps on the southern side down. We are quite cognitive of our neighbours, the 2-storey apartment or the townhouses on that side. This building is designed to minimise any overshadowing onto our neighbours, but also recognise that the important corner, which is both in the planning accentuated with activity, but also in the crossroads of these important streets, is on the main corner with the traffic lights. And we've tried to design a building that will say, hey, we are the shops, if you want to come here, please come here, and use the scale that we get out of the residential use to achieve that. That's the corner that I'm talking about, so it'll have activity on the bottom and some residential on top. And that's the part that I'm talking where we step the building down so we have minimal impact on our neighbours. We acknowledge that the internal spaces are generally a hardscape, and we're working really hard to get a good community outcome in that space. We're going to use that, all of us, to park our cars into the shops. So we're working quite hard on the qualities of those spaces. And then on top of the roof, we'll have a really good private space for the residences, so they can recreate both in the communal area outside, but also in their space on top. Just one more slide. It is a complex site, and we're working through quite a complex variation on the titling that allows us to deliver the residences and the commercial as early as we can, and allow the sites I talked about to be developed in the future when we understand more and we're ready. I think I'll take questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you to John and Minister Berry before that. Our next speaker is Senior Manager, Planning Division, Environment Planning and Sustainable Development Directorate, George Cilliers.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Those of you that don't know me, I look after the development assessment side of things in the Planning and Land Authority part of EPSDD. I've got a number of questions I have to run through, so I'll just tackle the questions first, and then afterwards, at question time, you can pose those to me. I had a question around Cocoa Molonglo that was covered. Yeah. Yeah. I don't use the slides. No, I'm just talking, responding to the questions. Thank you. Peter's already run you through the Cocoa Molonglo development. So the question there was, in terms of DA, what's the update? Well, obviously there is no DA, and Peter is busy with his consultation process through that. Another question I had related to an update on the service station McDonald's site and what's happening there. What I can report is that there's a delay experienced with the Icon water assets that's provided to the site. That was apparently not to their standard, and the developer will need about 2 weeks to resolve this issue and for Icon to undertake its final inspections, after which we can issue Crown leases. We also spoke to the architect this afternoon, and he advised that new construction work will get underway as soon as possible after that, that they aim to finish the project within 14 weeks from commencement. As you know, the site consists of two blocks, so Caltex and Oporto buildings should be completed around the same time as the McDonald's site. Just an update on where the development application is up to for Block 3, Section 12 Coombs. That's the development application lodged by the Zapari Group. The initial notification closed on the 15th of October 2000 now, and we've received approximately 141 representations on that. The application remains under assessment. The proponent foreshadowed a potential amendment to the application, and if we receive amendment, it's likely to be re-notified. I had a question around the meaning of maximum number of dwellings per block and the level of certainty provided to the community, and what that all means in terms of the way we assess development applications. The answer to that from our end is that the maximum number of dwellings originates from the initial work undertaken with the estate development stage when we established Coombs and Wright. The number of units of the site was initially intended for when the site was developed. If the developer wants to exceed this number, where that number exists, the resultant development applications will have to have regard to the territory plan and the considerations of Section 120 of the Planning and Development Act. Section 120 amongst it include two considerations. The one relates to probable impacts and environmental impacts, and the other one relates to the suitability of the land. In testing these two considerations, the Planning and Land Authority may have, as in this case, probably will have regard to the initial intended yield for the land and the impacts that will flow from that, for example, the surrounding traffic network and other services. To test the suitability of a site, the Planning Authority can also have regard to the cumulative cumulative impact of a development that's in excess of what it was intended for initially when the land was released. We use various tools to that end. For example, we can use solar access modeling, traffic studies, parking studies, shadow modeling, and analyze the interface requirements such as setbacks and how that impact on the surrounding neighbourhood. The Planning and Land Authority also needs to consider all submissions it receives during the public notification time frame. Once we've considered those, the authority has a number of options. We can approve a development with conditions, we can refuse the application, or we can seek further information from the proponent to inform the application. If we require further information, the authority may decide to re-notify the application before it makes its decision. It is important, though, to know that if we require further information, it extends the time frame of deciding the DA. If the application is refused, then the proponent has the opportunity to lodge a reconsideration application. If the reconsideration application is refused, then the proponent has the option of appealing the decision at the tribunal. So, in summary, the Independent Planning Authority's role is to assess and determine development proposals to ensure a good planning outcome while minimising any adverse impact on the community and the neighbourhood. That is to balance the competing interests of the community and developer to make an evidence-based decision that relies as much on factual evidence as possible while considering the human factor, that is, the community it serves. Then I also had a question around the number of applications where we've approved a greater number of dwellings than what was initially planned for. I'm aware, we did an analysis, we're aware of 4 applications. I can provide you with the block and sections afterwards if you require those. The number of units that were increased range was mostly at the order, for 3 of them, were at the order of 20 to 25% more units developed, and for 1 of them, Block 5, Section 15 right, was about 45% more than what was approved. All of those 4 sites were RZ4 zoned high-density residential sites. Then I also had a question around the community, Coombs Community Hub and the community orbit that's underneath the childcare facility, and why that space is required and how it will be used. That space was provided under Rule 8 of the Coombs Precinct Code, which is a mandatory rule requiring the buildings to be zoned community facilities to provide a facility for community use. This was further clarified in the Crown lease that required a community activity centre with a minimum GFA of 300 square metres. The space was approved as a community hall in June 2016, with a community hall actually measuring 324 square metres. A certificate of occupancy has been issued for the community hall part of it. We spoke to the architect about this, and it's understood that the only remaining work to be done there is the floor covering, and they yet to decide whether it will be carpets or tiles, depending on what it will be used for. This is a private development, and it will not be handed over to any particular group, as I understand from my discussions. The management of a space will be undertaken by the owner. We'll have a booking system in place, and there is, in response to the last question, there is no statutory requirement for the landowner to consult with the community about the space, but they are required to provide the space. And I think this is my last question, related to the removal of height restrictions in the Molonglo Valley back in 2010, and whether the government would consider reinstating height limits. The Coombs and Wright concept plans were adopted in 2008. These primarily gave guidance to the assessment of estate development plans for the area. The 2008 versions restricted heights in the CZ5 zones, they're the blue ones, zoned areas to a minimum of 3 stories and a maximum of 6 stories. The 2 concept plans were consolidated into one document in 2010. The consolidated version specified minimum building heights of 3 stories, but reverted the control back to general development codes for a maximum height. This decision was taken to align with the requirements with controls elsewhere applied in Canberra. As anywhere else, it's open to the government to revise its policy to impose height limits in Molonglo Valley, but this is a process that would require policy analysis to support such a proposal and obviously also a variation to the territory plan and the associated consultation processes. Thank you. I think that.
Thank you, George. Our next speaker is the Project Manager, Development Delivery, Molonglo Valley, David Thornhill.
No worries. Hello everybody, David Thornhill from Suburban Land Agency. I've got to click through, yep. Okay, and again. Sorry, okay. So acknowledging we're a little bit behind time at the moment because we had a few technical problems, but I'll go through this as quickly as I can. If I do go over something that you want to talk about a little bit later on, by all means, please come and see myself or one of the team later on today. I'm going to give a quick update of a few of the projects that the Suburban Land Agency is doing in the region, and also touch on a couple of the projects that Infrastructure and Capital Works are undertaking in the region, some major infrastructure works. And I have Stuart here as well later on this afternoon from that area to answer any questions, possibly in the question and answer time. So up we have on the screen here is the area kind of known as North Wright and North Coombs. This is an aerial photo that was taken quite recently. And as you can see here that a lot of the civil works, the works that we're undertaking is nearing completion. We're aiming to have these works completed late this calendar year or early next year. So then once completion, the sites that we have sold, and we still have a number of sites available for sale in this area, they will go through the settlement process with the residents, and then house building activity will commence probably around about mid next year. So I expect this time next year there'll be another couple of 100 homes and 100 more families living in the Molonglo Valley coming along to one of these events. A lot of questions get put to us about what's happening with the area known as the Coombs Peninsula. So this is the area at the end of Fred Daly Avenue, which is kind of bright orange on the map that you can see. So for a bit of context in relation to this, because it's always good to understand the context of why this area wasn't developed. In the original Estate Development Plan DA that was submitted for Coombs, the Conservation Council has had some objections to that due to the environmental concerns of the area. It went through an ACAT process, and the mediation result from that process was some ACAT orders that this area be excluded from development until the Molonglo River Plan of Management came into effect. The government is working currently to finalise that plan of management, and the idea is once that plan of management is in effect, that this area would be developed for suburban residential development. In saying that, a lot of the area gets, the next question is, what type of development will this be? This area, at the current intention, is this will be a very similar to what was in the original development application, which will be kind of a continuation of the standard residential, single residential dwelling sites that are kind of adjacent to it. The next one I'll quickly touch on is the Coombs Place space that's proposed along Edgeworth Parade. Some of you may be aware that in May, June this year, we undertook a consultation process using the ACT Government's Your Say consultation platform. As well as that Your Say platform, we also consulted with a couple of workshops with the local students at this school here on what they may like to see in this area here. I think on screen now you can see one of the creative drawings that the students put together of what they like to see in their open space areas. The consultation process was very well received. We received over 200 submissions from the Your Say and for some other submissions. And so we're progressing that works now. So since then, we've gone through the process to appoint a designer. So we've had to go through a procurement process for that. That has been a little bit protracted in getting that to the final stages of appointment of a consultant that we're very close to be able to undertake. From then, we have to do some, the designer needs to finalise their design, and so we're hoping to have some we'll be having some consultation and development approval, likely in the first quarter of next year, with construction throughout next year and then operation towards the end of late 2019. The next thing I want to quickly touch on is the Coombs 3A Phase 2 pedestrian network. So what this is the connection of the existing footpath and cycle and equestrian trails that are currently around Holden's Creek area, connecting around the peninsula area and down along Annabelle View, and then connecting into the trunk cycle way and pedestrian way around there. Again, this one has been a little bit protracted in timing getting there. There was a lot of questions around how close we were operating near the Molonglo River Reserve and whether we needed a separate environmental approval or a statement of environmental significance. We've confirmed all those requirements, and we are now likely to commence work for that body of work in early 2018 and to be complete late next year as well. Now, the question then always gets asked about what about the missing link that goes from the bottom around Harold Holt, kind of across the Molonglo River into that trunk network. We're currently working with EPSDD and TCCS on how that one can be brought forward. It's not part of our current scope of works, and the timing of that will be subject to a separate approval and budgetary process. When the works that we're doing are underway, it is going to cause a bit of issues in relation to access to the river corridor. Because the site will be a construction site, we'll be fencing along Annabelle View down 30 or 40 metres, kind of to where that sewer access maintenance track is now, around there, because it will be a construction site, because we'll be having machinery and all that moving around there, and it's one of our requirements with our construction sites that they're fenced. Whitlam, I'll quickly touch on Whitlam, which is the new suburb that the Suburban Land Agency is doing in the Molonglo Valley. So Whitlam is the first one in the area known as Molonglo Stage 3, so that's kind of north of the river, abutting William Hovell Drive up the top, and the kind of extension works of John Gorton Drive that are currently underway. What can I say about Whitlam? So Whitlam, ultimately, when delivered, will be about 2,100 single and medium density dwellings. It will contain a community facility site, a commercial site, and a local centre as well. We're currently undertaking the detailed planning and seeking approval for stage 1. So that's the area kind of in the top right-hand side of the development. 619 dwellings is what we've proposed in the first stage, and all of them are proposed to be released this financial year. The DA is currently available for public consultation on the EPSDD webpage, so if you have any want to see any more detailed plans of that, by all means log on to that and have a look. And then quickly I'll touch on the infrastructure and capital works updates. There's kind of 3 projects that I'll just quickly mention, but if there's any others that are of interest, by all means talk to myself or Stuart or any of the other team later on tonight. So John Gorton Drive 3A, that's the first 900 metres from William Hovell down the old kind of Coppins Crossing Road. That's a dual carriageway that's currently under construction. The current program for finishing that is early next calendar year. Tenders for the next 600 metres from where that finishes down are currently being assessed, with a program to commence early next year and complete early 2020. And then with the Molonglo River Bridge, the initial concepts for the bridge have been completed. Preliminary design and geotech works are occurring next year. However, the timing for the final design, approval and construction are all subject to a budget process at a later date. So I might cut it off there and answer any questions in the questions and answer time, but just trying to catch up on some speed. Hope that wasn't too quick for everyone.
Thank you, David. We are running just a touch behind this evening, but we are going to take a few minutes to have a small Q&A session. If I could ask David, John, George and Minister Berry to come to the front.
resident of Wright, and I was holding out for Coco being a hotel because I've got a lot of family that are interstate and not a house big enough to house them. Is that part of the concept?
I will pass it on to Peter. I don't know, maybe you can address.
And we've looked at, on some of the future sites, of an opportunity to have a hotel on the site. The first stage will be commercial residential because we want to get onto that and build both the houses for the community but also the commercial amenity, and then we'll keep on working on some of the future sites, and if a hotel is able to be built there and there's enough interest that we can get an operator, I'm pretty sure we'll look quite strongly at it. The lease allows for it, and we've confirmed that the site will be able to be developed for that if the market conditions works in that sense.
We've had a question come in over the internet. Has the impact of traffic been considered along Fred Daly Avenue? So I'm assuming that's Fred Daly Avenue when I'm talking about the Coombs Peninsula. The answer to that is yes. The area was part of the original estate development plan that was done for the area that forecast the traffic flows of the dwellings that would be in that and how they would go along Fred Daly Avenue. However, so it has been confirmed once, but when we would go back and do our additional estate development plan, we will need to reconfirm that as well.
Thank you. Minister, just a couple of questions. Why was the tender for the Coombs shop reduced from 1,000 square metre, 1,500 square metres to 1,000 square metres within a week of the closing of the tender process? First question. Secondly, why was the sole tenderer known to the ACT administration as somebody who let unfulfilled for at least a couple of years an Amaroo prospect, commercial site? And thirdly, who approved the appalling design for the Coombs shops that looks like a disused bowling alley? Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. On the first question, we'll just have to take that on notice. We just don't know the answer about the reduction in the square metres of the centre, and I'm not sure how it gets approved. George, do you have the answer? Okay. And on the middle question, there is no personality test for the purchase of land in the ACT. But you would only have to hope, or not hope, expect that a developer would develop and tenant and do what every other developer does as far as purchasing a property. But there is no restrictions on people based on their personality in the planning processes. And I'm not sure how we get around that other than looking at specific requirements for future developments. But it's not been the case that it's been required previously.
I guess the answer to that also comes into the release methodology that was taken at the time. So where it was just an auction and not a tender, it also wasn't a pre-qualified auction. Therefore, the process that was taken at the time did allow the person who paid the most amount of money at the time of the auction got the land. That's what we're reviewing now, our sales release methodology, to ensure that when we do go out with such sales in the future, we've got a better probability of getting a better outcome.
I'll take the third part of the question, who approved the Coombs shops. It is important to keep in mind that the Coombs shops was initially refused by the Planning and Land Authority. A reconsideration application was lodged, that was again refused, and that was taken to the tribunal. The grounds for refusal related to the corridors in the building, the finish of the buildings, and the Planning and Land Authority instituted a number of requirements to improve the facade as well. In the end, the matter was settled through a tribunal order after mediation.
Yep.
I was just wondering when you think the peninsula will be developed.
Yes, I skipped over that one. 2020-21 is when it's currently identified in the government's land release program. So that's when we would anticipate a release around that time. Had one, I think, final question just in order to move with time frame, but we can take some questions at the end. It was just to confirm that there's no time frame or funding for the Molonglo Valley Bridge. And I will look at Stuart and he will nod. And yes, so there is no time frame or funding. It is subject to further designs to come up with a more robust number of what the funding would be. And then it goes through the infrastructure, capital works process of a budget appropriation to undertake those works.
And sorry, just to clarify on the personality, I meant the personal decisions of the developer, I guess. And it's just not something we've run into as a government that I can recall. But as I said, I've asked the SLA and Mingle to talk with you about what can we do now as far as future developments, but also how we can assist the Coombs and Wright and Molonglo community to have somewhere that you can gather together, collect essentials if that can be worked through. Join up for a coffee or a feed if that works as well. So please engage in that because I think it's a good opportunity to put something in place here to bring the community together in different ways and talk about some of the other issues that might be happening out here as well.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Minister. John, David, George and Peter. We do have to conclude this brief Q&A here as we have many other presenters, but just a reminder there will be another Q&A session at the end and of course then the opportunity to speak with our presenters at the various stalls at the end of tonight. I'd now like to ask Station Sergeant, Woden Police Station, Karen Drake and Stephen Booth from Traffic to speak on behalf of the AFP.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for this opportunity to address you this evening. I'll keep mine very brief because I know we are running behind. But the reason why I brought Stephen along, Sergeant Booth, is because last time I spoke here, nearly every single one of the questions that was asked of me actually related to traffic. So I'll speak a little bit about the crime stats just very briefly. And it's a bit of a good news story, really. So in the last, comparatively the last quarter, just in relation to property-related crime, there's been a serious reduction in those crime rates for both Coombs, and Denman Prospect as well, in the vicinity of around 63 to 150%. So I think that's very indicative of, the crime rates are taking a downward trend, which is excellent. The one area where there has been a major increase in a 12-month comparative view is in the area of motor vehicles, theft of motor vehicles. And I'll talk a little bit about that in relation to my next section, which is holiday tips. And John from Neighbourhood Watch probably will talk on some of these things as well. Holiday season is upon us, and if you're going away, the advice that we have is obviously know your neighbours. If you're going to be going away, let your neighbours know, give them contact details, particularly in the event of an emergency. Security tips, definitely there's a lot of quite cheap gadgets and things you can get from Bunnings now to secure your windows. You don't have to buy the expensive locks. Highly recommend those. Mailboxes, make sure people collect your mail for you. One of the interesting things we've found is that if their house does get broken into, they are taking the motor vehicles as well, not always, but it is a bit of a trend that we have noticed. So we do recommend if you're going to be leaving a vehicle behind, secure those the keys to that vehicle somewhere where it's not easily available to someone who may unfortunately break into your premises. And the other important thing I think is reporting. If you do see something, then there are a couple of avenues of reporting. One of them is anonymously through Crime Stoppers, which is 1800 333 000. But obviously, if there is something that's going on at the time that concerns you, if it is serious, then it's 000. And if it's something that you believe that police need to attend, but it's not as urgent, then it's 131 444. So, as I said, plenty of opportunity at the end to have questions, and certainly I'll be here in the booth if you would like to ask some further questions of me, but I'll hand over to Stephen now.
I apologise, I was asked to come here at last notice, so I don't have anything particularly prepared for you. Probably more...
John Gorton.
John Gorton Drive. Obviously, John Gorton Drive's your main road. I understand that there's been a little bit of a speedway, or people think it's a bit of a speedway at the moment. I can tell you from our mobile traffic team that they do spend quite a bit of time looking at that road. Of course, there are a lot of roads that we've got to cover throughout every day. So if there are specific concerns or you have a specific complaint about the driving of a person, you can, as always, report that matter through police or through Crime Stoppers. If you don't want to make an official complaint, or you want to report anonymously, you can do that. And we will take all your complaints and see what we can do about sorting that for you.
Thank you to Karen and Stephen. Our next speaker is John Mellows from Neighbourhood Watch.
Hello and good evening. I'm John. I'm the area coordinator for Neighbourhood Watch for Coombs. I guess most people know what Neighbourhood Watch is about, but for those that don't, it's about crime prevention, particularly relating to persons and property. It is done in conjunction with the police. It aims basically to get neighbours looking after each other's property and reporting incidents of violence against persons. Coombs Neighbourhood Watch has been going now for very slightly under 1 year. So we started with nothing. We now have 25 members. In the year since we started, we've produced 6 newsletters which have been distributed to around 1,500 residences in Coombs. And I tell you what, I've learned a lot about Coombs by pounding the streets delivering these newsletters. We have distributed several hundred bin stickers, that is to say Neighbourhood Watch stickers you can put on your garbage bin so that people know that Neighbourhood Watch is active in your area. We have had installed 5 metal Neighbourhood Watch stickers, plates, on the 5 main entrances to Coombs so that people driving in know that Neighbourhood Watch is active. And we've also started, but I'll come back to this, we've started to get translated into other languages for non-English speaking people, news about Neighbourhood Watch and what it does. So we've produced one set of leaflets in Hindi. We're looking at trying to do one in Mandarin. The trouble with Neighbourhood Watch in Coombs is that because we have no up-to-date census data, we really have no feel for just what the ethnic English-speaking composition of people in Coombs is, and hopefully next census around that will be improved. Karen mentioned the latest newsletter, number 6, is currently at our sponsor awaiting copying. It'll be in people's letterboxes within a fortnight or so. Anybody who wants an advance copy, there are some over on the desk back there, and that does include a lot of tips about, you know, what to do if you're thinking of going on holiday in December and January, most of which are drawn from the AFP Police's manual on looking after your property and yourself. That's all I wanted to say. I'll just say one more thing. We do need more members. and there are membership forms over there. It costs nothing. You do have to go through a bit of a police check to become a member, but as far as I've seen in the year, that has not been a problem for anybody. And I do hope that anybody here tonight that isn't a member will sign up. Thanks very much.
Thank you, John. I'd now like to invite Ian McGlynn, Director of Transport Canberra, to speak.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for having me again to the Molonglo Mingle. I apologise that I wasn't able to attend the last Molonglo Mingle was because we were just in the process of about to go out to the community in regards to what is the proposed bus network for next year, but none of the stuff had been released, so I couldn't actually come out and tell you what I wasn't able to tell you at the time. So what we've done over the last few months is it's been a two-stage process. We went out first to the community and asked them what they wanted. They wanted more regular buses that covered the suburbs, etc. And then we went out with from that first concept that we did. We went out and we did some design, some networking, and then we released that to the community for a second stage of feedback. And what I've got is I've just got some statistics. So we touched around 13,000 pieces of feedback from the community, which is quite significant in the Canberra community. The people are very passionate and told us a lot about public transport. Around about 27% of that feedback in totality was from the Western Creek and Molonglo communities. So, people were telling us around that the original proposal had a lot of services terminating at Coolman Court. You would then have to change again then to get a bus to Woden. So people didn't like that, and so they told us lots and lots of different things. And so what we've done now is we've now released the new network, and unfortunately I can't display it up here on the screens because it's a very long map and it doesn't show you. So I've actually bought a big large corn flute, and at the end of the program I'll actually be standing up the back, so if you've got any questions please come and talk to me around that. Primarily, what have we done? So we've been working with the developers over in Denman Prospect. So we've got the two services that'll go from Denman Prospect. We've got the Rapid 10 that'll service Denman Prospect. So it'll actually go down to the new shops, and around that shop area there's around about a third, I think, Nick, of the density of Denman Prospect will be living in that area. So the buses will actually service the shops and the suburb, and then come down John Gorton Drive. The local route, the 66, which is one of the buses that's been put in, and of course we're changing all the numbers across the territory, so it's a bit tongue-tying. So there's the Route 66, which will be a connection between Coolman Court out through Coombs Ride, Denman Prospect, but it'll go back to Woden. And then we have it's the R10, which is the rapid service, which will start at the Denman Prospect shops, come down John Gorton Drive, and then make its way into the city. So extremely fast trip into the city, and it has proven popular. It is one of the rapid services that the 10 rapid services that the government has come out and said that they're prepared to implement. The thing with this, a normal rapid services has a frequency of every 15 minutes. This one at the moment, just because of the area is still building, it'll have a frequency of every half an hour. The network itself is a 7-day network, so you actually get a weekend network as well. And you don't have to cross roads. So different parts of the territory at the moment have different route numbers on weekends, and they have to catch the bus on the other side of the road. One of the biggest things that we did, and there wasn't too many days I missed being in the Canberra Times, was around about school service. So I do have a question online tonight, which was put in previously, which is there a local school bus coming through Denman Prospect, Wright and Coombs to Stromlo High? Yes, there is. And the good thing about the school services that are being implemented is what the school services in the morning, it is in the reverse of the afternoon. So in the current network, we've got school services that go one way in the morning and different ways in the afternoon. So they're going to mirror each other. So there is a school bus going over there. One of the other questions I've got is about Annabelle View Street or Drive. I'm sorry, I do apologise. And there's some questions around there about a restriction in parking down one side of the road. So yes, there is going to be a restriction in parking on the nature side of the road, the opposite the housing, and that's to allow so that the buses can get down and around. And that was part of the original stages of the development when we're working with people like David, that we actually proposed where bus routes will go, and now we've got the opportunity to do it, and so that'll actually link in with the bottom of Coombs, and I think the lady over the back there, she'll be extremely happy that she's actually going to get a bus service near her house. And some other people tonight have asked me, will there be a bus stop along Annabelle View? Yes, there will be. It won't be near the residences, it'll be down the bottom of Annabelle View on the flat. So there'll be plenty of opportunities for people to use that service. So with the network, there was, after consultation, there was 37 changes to the network in totality across the territory. I've got them all up the back there, and I welcome you all to come up and say good day and ask me any questions you like, and I'm happy to give you some explanations about the methodology, about how we came up with some of the decisions. But thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Ian. Our next speaker is Acting Director, City Services, Stephen Allegria.
Thank you. G'day everybody. Thanks for having me here tonight. Sorry I don't have any entertaining slides for you this evening. We had just one question in relation to the maintenance of grass and trees and so forth in this area. And it was around our mulching program. So I'll just give you a quick update. We will be mulching shrub beds and undertaking our weed control program in the coming weeks and months. But as you appreciate, it is a very, very dry season, and unfortunately where we don't have irrigation, which is most places, there's really not a great deal we can do in terms of obviously watering, so we're praying for rain like everybody in that respect. But we do ask the community, if you do have an interest in your street tree, for example, we do encourage you to water your street tree. Obviously, we ask that you don't prune it or interfere with it, but please do water it if you have a tree in front of your property or in front of your complex. That will be much appreciated. We do have a watering program that started in October that goes through and waters all of our newly planted trees for probably two to 3 years after they've been planted. So that's underway, but any assistance you can provide is much appreciated. And the other message is, if there are specific issues that you do note around, playgrounds or mowing or street trees, for example, just please let us know through Fix My Street. We do take them seriously, we do action them. You're the eyes and ears out there, so we're more than happy to receive feedback about things that need maintenance around the city. So that's all I had to say in the interest of time, so I'll hover around for questions at the end too. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Now, next to the microphone is Project Director, Capital Estate Developments, Mick McDonald-Crowley.
Thank you for your time. My plan is to give you a little update on where we're at with Denman Prospect. Obviously the shops are a key issue for the whole of the Molonglo Valley, and we're doing everything that we possibly can. I'll get to that. But for those that live down the Coombs right end, you'll see we are progressing with the Ridgeline Park, and that's an area that we decided to retain for the benefit of all the public, and we really do see these assets as Molonglo Valley assets, not just Denman Prospect assets, and they're going to be of a standard that are world class, and so I encourage you to get down there and look at it and participate in that community, because we genuinely feel like we're part of the Molonglo Valley, not just Denman Prospect out there on our own. We're building a park at the top of the ridgeline there, and my direction from my boss was build the best park in Canberra, and that's an artist's impression that you can see there, and that's it as it is being constructed. It's a little bit scary. I actually climbed up it the other day. Those pods are 6 metres off the ground, but you're in a cage as you're going between those. It's a really exciting playground and a great place for kids to go out and explore, and it's next to a bit of bushland and a place that we're hoping that kids will be able to get out and adventure and test their skills and learn. There are also some more modest playgrounds, but obviously the size and scale of that thing is quite a feature. That there is the shops. It looks a bit random at the moment because it's sitting in the middle of a paddock. The really pleasing thing for us is that we have secured tenants, and I can't offer much empathy to the lessee of the shops in Coombs. The only thing that I can say is it was not easy to attract tenants. Coolum Court is a very efficient shopping centre run by a large corporation, and they have good tenants in there. We couldn't put a Woolies or a Coles or a supermarket operator of that calibre into ours. But the operator that we have got is a guy by the name of Steve Smith. He runs an IGA out in Yass. He came to our community day the other day. He has a keen eye for good produce, and you know, we went for a tour of Sydney looking at supermarkets with Steve. Harris Farm are obviously the benchmark in terms of what that fresh produce that you can get up there, and so our aspiration is to provide a facility that will be of a similar calibre, but also to be able to provide, you know, your normal domestic goods that you need from a supermarket, so your toiletries and the like. I know it's not walking distance for people in Coombs and Wright, but it is going to be a lot easier to get to than going into Coolum, and our focus has always also been around the car parking, so, you know, the ease of being able to park right at the front door, get out, go in, get what you need and then go. It's probably not the place that you go to do your monthly shop, but certainly your weekly or your daily shop. That's what our drive to do is. We also have a strong passion within our group about public art, so I work for the guys who own the airport. You see the public art around there. That's me. You can see on the, I'll get more on the right hand side there in the orange jacket. Those eucalyptus leaves are 6 metres tall. That is a design that was done by Naomi Taylor-Royce. She is an art student from the ANU. We went to a competition. We've obviously got world-class sculptures down there with the yellow and the Corten steel things that you see on John Gorton Drive. But Terry and the family thought it was important to support the developing arts community in Canberra, and I found that piece to be absolutely breathtaking when I saw it last week. And once it's painted in that red eucalyptus colour, it's going to be quite outstanding, and that's going to be at the gateway into the supermarket. So it's going to be a really cool facility to go and look at. And again, as I said about the playground, the supermarket and the shops are there for the residents of the Molonglo Valley, not just for Denman Prospect residents. So there is going to be a good facility, and it will be opening there. We were hoping for December, but it's likely, we've got some refrigeration on its way from China. The freezers have arrived, they're being installed at the moment. It's probably likely to be January by the time the shelves are stacked, but we're still aiming or gunning for late December, around Christmas time. But it is real, the fit out is happening. The ceilings are going into the space at the moment. It's got this magnificent burnished concrete floor that's going in. It's really going to be quite outstanding, and the temptation would be to think that your price of your groceries is going to be high there. The incentives are there for Steve to have, well, very competitively priced groceries, so that's where that's at. We've also had a couple of community days, and again, it's hard for us to get the information out to everyone. We do it through our Denman Prospect site, but keep an eye on that. When we put on a day, it's of high quality. There's lots of free things for the kids and families to do. You can see people that watch the block. Dan from the block was at our last one. We had some cooking demonstrations, gardening demonstrations. lots of free food and goodies. So we do that, and it's a way for our very newly developing community to actually get and meet neighbours and do things, and so we encourage everyone to come along to those. At our last community day, we also we liaised with the fire brigade, and we had a community fire units. We, at Denman Prospect, we've offered to acquire a couple of trailers. You may have seen them in Chapman and Duffy and Curtin and those fringe suburbs. The community fire units also need volunteers. So there's no point in having the trailers if there aren't the volunteers who are going to man them. And so for those people that are watching at home, or for anyone here who's interested in learning about educating themselves about how to combat fire, you're not firefighters, you're basically doing some early preparation work before a fire front hits, and these trailers that are provided are not cheap to provide, but we want to do that, but we need some volunteers. So we've got the site available on our website, and I'm not sure whether you can pick it up at the bottom of that image there, at the bottom of the community fire unit thing. It's the ESA have a portal that you can go in and register yourself. Finally, before I wrap up, I'd just like to talk about Homes for Homes, and this is a community fundraising initiative that we've done in Denman Prospect. Every property that we've sold there has a permissive title and that requires the vendor, so the person who's selling, to voluntarily donate 0.1% of the sale price to the Big Issue. It's a charity, and then the Big Issue then allocate those funds to deal with homelessness. You can see Steve Persons is a tall bloke on the left-hand side there. He runs the Big Issue. We handed a cheque over for $200,000. Sorry, we've handed about $300,000 over to Homes for Homes. They allocated $200,000 to Havelock House for their initiative to deal with homelessness. Our only requirement on the funds that are generated in Canberra is we want those monies to be spent in Canberra to benefit the homeless and the needy people in Canberra. It's an initiative we do. It's an initiative we're encouraging the ACT government to do with all of their land. I've done it on my place. I live in Kingston. I can't advocate it without actually having it on my place as well. It's really easy to do. You can opt out if you want to. It's free to opt out. But Homes for Homes has been a great thing, and it's helped to provide another dynamic to what the community up at Denman Prospect's doing. So thank you for your time. There we go. I missed it. Wrong one. There we go.
There we go. Lovely. Thanks, Nick. Our next speaker is from ACT Parks and Conservation Service, Molonglo Ranger Darren LaRue.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to fly through a couple of the operational and project delivery aspects as they relate to the Molonglo River Reserve. So first up is the Barra Hill Restoration Project. So Barra Hill is the 50-hectare area that lies sort of adjacent to the Coombs Peninsula. It's been the subject of fairly intensive boxgum grassy woodland restoration over the last 6 years. We've had some exciting work that's been done recently over there, including the landscaping work at the hilltop. So we now have some new lookouts, seating areas, as well as some signage, and of course restoration works, including tube stock plantings, native shrubs, ground story. So I'd encourage all of you, if you haven't been out to the Barra Hill Summit Walk, it's a great walk, and there's 360-degree views out over Canberra. It's spectacular. So we've done the landscaping in a sympathetic and passive manner, so it brings you quite close to the pink-tailed worm lizard habitat. And yeah, it's a really great space. Staying with Barra Hill, we also are currently constructing a habitat sculpture on the peninsula, which is as part of our commitments to provide some short-term structures that provide habitat for wildlife. And in doing so, we're doing this in a really interesting way that will hopefully be a focal point for the community to get up close and personal and see some of these elusive creatures. They've been shown to work really well in the reserve, so watch this space. That should be done by the end of the year. We've also got the field guide to the plants of the Molonglo Valley, which has been a long time in the making. It's a compendium of native and exotic plants of the region, really valuable resource. It will be sold at the ANBG bookstore as well as the Arboretum bookstore, or privately. Come chat to me afterwards. It will be $40 a book, and all proceeds will be going back into the river corridor, preferably through a park care group which we're working to establish. Just in general operational highlights, ongoing weed management through the reserve is ticking away, including African lovegrass, serrated tussock and blackberry, targeting other weeds as well. We've got a feral pigs management program, particularly in the riparian and pink-tailed worm lizard habitat areas, so areas of high conservation value. We've recently had a mountain bike event that went really well, and we've also just recently completed the Water Watch platypus surveys at various points along the river corridor. So there's been a few things on the go, a few things coming up. Come have a chat with me afterwards if you have any questions. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Darren. And now I'd like to invite Senior Manager, Community Development, Suburban Land Agency, Jodie Gleeson, and Molonglo Valley resident, Tim Mansfield, to the microphone.
Hi everyone, I'm actually going to hand over straight to Tim so he can fill you in on all the resident-led activities we have going on at the moment in Wright and Coombs, and then I'll come back and tell you about all the other mingle-related activities.
Thanks, Jodie. I'm here tonight representing the various groups of residents who are taking on leadership roles in developing and building on the events and activities that we have available in our local community to help us build a safe and a vibrant community. Some years ago now, we began as a single group of interested people of various ages and stages, and some of us about to move into this area, some who'd been here for a few years. And we're now, while we were supported by Mingle to help initiate events and activities. And now while we're still supported by Mingle, we've found that a better way for us to be working has been for different groups to converge or convene and then disperse based on the sort of projects that might be of interest to us as individuals. And so, for example, some of you might have been fortunate to attend the Eid Fest held here in the school back in September. If not, look out for it next year. Hopefully some of you will be able to head along to the Diwali Festival of Lights this Saturday night from 6:30 p.m. at the Stromlo Cottage. And both of these events were initiated and organised by our fellow residents with the support of Mingle. Our next big ticket item after Diwali will be our community's third annual Christmas event, the Molonglo Valley Community Carols on Saturday the 1st of December. So that'll be here at the school starting from 6 p.m. This event will bring together a range of groups, including the school, Stromlo Church and a local community choir, and will be primarily a chance to come together as a community to BYO picnic, or you can buy a snag from the barbie and sing some of your favourite Christmas carols as we head into the chaotic festive season. Incidentally, if you are interested in being part of that community choir, who'll be leading just a simple bracket of carols that we all probably know really well anyway, there'll be a group of us meeting a couple of times for a few Sunday afternoon sing-throughs and some maybe Sunday afternoon refreshments from Sunday the 11th of November. If you're interested in doing that, look us up on Facebook. The Molonglo Community Christmas Choir should get us, or you can email molonglochristmaschoir@gmail.com if Facebook is not your thing. We've got a whole bunch of ongoing activities that residents are taking leadership of, and they're in this brochure which you can pick up on your way out, and they are online. We've got the Molonglo Valley Markets, which is going from strength to strength each month. Our next one is on the 9th of December. We have the Young at Heart group, which is attracting retirees living in our local area every Wednesday, and that's at the Stromlo Cottage as well. And then the Molonglo Valley Book Club, which meets every Tuesday. So if books are your thing, then that's a place to come together and talk about them. So you can find out what's going on around the place in the Our Molonglo Facebook page. So if you already like the Mingle page, we'd suggest you hop on over to the Our Molonglo page, which is more resident run. You'll see all sorts of things advertised, notified through that page. So it's well worth adding yourself to that page. If you're not on Facebook, you can email mingle at act.gov.au. I'm not stealing all Jodie's thunder, but they'll be able to help you get onto the mailing list. That will ensure that you can get the information you need. And if you're someone who goes, oh, I've had all these great ideas, but I haven't quite known how to go about initiating them or finding the right people to surround myself with so that I can make them happen, then that's also an avenue to do that. So you can either contact us via Facebook or you can get in there and contact via Mingle. So there you go, lots of people to talk to. And yeah, over to you, Jodie.
Thank you, Tim. I also just wanted to say a quick hi to the people at home. So apologies for the delays in the live stream earlier on this evening, but we were conscious because we have had quite a few hundred people already log in at home tonight. So did really want to make that live stream available. Shortly, you'll see that all the presenters do have questions from home, and that's why we've been scurrying around. So there's been a lot of questions that we will try to answer. So I really appreciate your understanding. We've recently conducted some research for the Mingle program, and I know some of you in the room have been part of those focus groups or online survey. And part of that has come through some people didn't understand what the Mingle program actually was. And what we are actually here to do is connect you as individuals in your new community with each other and also with place and with your local facilities, and also to connect you back to government. So it's not all about events and activities, but in saying that, we have delivered over 90 events since January this year for Wright and Coombs alone. So we have been very busy, but what it is also about is connecting to other things. So that's why we work with the police quite closely and the River Corridor team. But also we're really enthusiastic to hear about your ideas. And if you're actually feeling isolated or you don't know anybody, then come and speak to us. And there's people in the same situation as you, and we'd really love to connect you. The Mingle program has been running for a number of years. We are committed now to rolling it out in North Wright and North Coombs, which is an extension of the existing program, and we are committed to delivering it in the Whitlam suburb as well. And with that becomes a commitment from my team. There's a couple of us here today, so whenever you see the Mingle logo somewhere, come and say hi and join in, and we'd love to hear from you. So it's not about delivering the huge scale events in Canberra, it's actually about meeting your neighbours and actually feeling safe and connected. A couple of things that I also wanted to provide in terms of the research that we did. We had a lot of positive feedback about the newsletters, so we will be continuing to do that and provide information. But if there's something that you're not receiving or information that you would like to receive, just let us know, and we can source that information and pop it into the newsletters that are delivered every quarter. We've also received feedback to say that we need more events and activities to target young single people who do feel isolated and are often living in apartment living here. So we'll be looking at ways to connect those people and also some of our youth and our teenagers to see how they can be involved in the community. We currently are initiating a mosaic program at the Stromlo Cottage where it will involve smashing up some tiles and creating some beautiful art down there and some pots. So we encourage you to, if you're interested, please contact Lisa who's here tonight. Many hands make light work. We also have a desire, we found out there was a desire that some people actually were really wanting to meet somebody but just didn't know how. So we really, if you're one of those people and you're sitting at home and you're not sure what to do, come and speak to us. We will help you connect with those people, and also a skill or a gap, because there's others like you that are out there. The other thing I'd just like to promote, we've been working really closely with the local businesses that have opened, and obviously there was a huge community event on Sunday, which was the Health Co-op launch. We've got a couple of people here tonight, including Junique, who is the latest women's health centre that's just recently opened up. But we have the chemist, we have we also, with the Health Co-op, there's a nurse and a physio, and a number of really local services. So as we get more information on that not-for-profit centre, we will put that information out to you, because we really want to get you connected with what's actually coming to town, including the dental surgery, which is now open as well. So in summary, I guess you can see on the slides behind me there's a lot going on, and some of you may not have been aware of all the things that are happening, but please do get involved. We're not scary. We just want to help you connect with each other. I'll hand over to Michael, and we'll get our speakers up ready to answer some Q&As.
Thanks, Jodie, and thank you to you too, Tim. Just invite our speakers, presenters to come and line up for the Q&A. As Jodie mentioned, a number of our presenters do have questions that have been received online, but at this point in time we will take any questions from the floor.
My question is for Transport Canberra. Will there be further consideration for minor adjustments to some of the proposed bus routes? My explanation for it is in respect of Route 66 as proposed. I see little point of bypassing existing bus stops on Fred Daly to go down Annabelle View to service one bus stop at the end, when in fact a proposed alternative which would deliver an alternative opportunity would be to continue down Fred Daly to one of the streets further down, for instance Madgwick, and turn left into that, continue down that street, coming into the bottom end of Annabelle, and in that way servicing the school and the hub. There are no stops planned for people to alight from the bus on the most of Annabelle View. So it has no advantage to anybody. So my question is, will there be further consideration, or is it set in concrete?
Thanks very much for your question. I'm happy to talk to you afterwards and just look on a bigger map so that I've got a full understanding of the streets. The presentation I have doesn't have the streets' names, so happy to talk to you. The network itself is built, but I'm happy to talk through your proposal, but at this stage it wouldn't change this iteration of what will be the new network.
I'm not sure who this would be directed to, but we have a lot of playgrounds and I love them, but I have a preschooler, so toilets are an issue. Who does that go to?
Thanks for the question. So TCCS manages the playgrounds that are developed in these areas. Generally speaking, yeah, we wouldn't provide a toilet unless it was a really high-use playground, like a district park. So for the local type playgrounds, generally speaking, we wouldn't provide a toilet. Often we have heard from the community, not just here but throughout Canberra, that people want their playgrounds to be co-located with shops and other facilities, and often that can obviously be a synergy where you've got potentially toilets in the shopping centre or associated that can also be used by the playground. So look, I do take your point, and the conversation in the community about toilets and playgrounds is certainly very much on the radar for us.
So it's interesting. It was one of the feedback that we got a lot on with the Your Say survey was toilet facilities, and as Stephen was saying, the local shops does have public toilets. They're not open at the moment, so I'll move on from that. One thing that we have been considering with the Edgeworth Parade play space and the Your Say is when we've kind of had some preliminary discussions and got some general agreement in principle with TCCS, is to consider some type of possibly hybrid classification for that area there, and recognising that it is only a small area. Could something like that actually, a toilet facility, be appropriate in that area? So that's something we're still considering. But there is a lot of work to go through to work out whether that would be appropriate in that area or whether if toilet facilities are appropriate in some other area in the region.
John, we might just hand to you for a moment to take a couple of the questions that have been asked online.
So I do have a couple of online questions here. One is, why are land sales slow in Wright and Coombs? And I guess, firstly, I'm a bit surprised. I don't actually think they are slow in Wright and Coombs, not with respect to our budgeted expectations of what we would deliver this year. I do also note that perhaps compared to 3 or 4 years ago, the ACT market land sales are different. But yeah, our understanding and our knowledge is that the sales we're getting here, as per our expectations, they're similar to our competitors' rates here as well, and similar to similar product that we're selling in other parts of the ACT. I've got another one here that's, why can't the government take over the shops? It's a good theoretical possibility. Firstly, I think that the shops have to be for sale, and I'm not aware that they're for sale at the moment. And they have to be at a price that would make good business sense to purchase. And the government needs to have made a decision that they're keen to be in the business of running shops. So essentially just ensuring that the public accountability of the public funds that we spent would be the appropriate business case for that. I'm not aware of any other shopping centre type thing that the government's currently purchased to be in that business.
Thanks, John. We have a question from the floor.
Considering the history of the region, that we had a sewage treatment plant and lots of toxicated soil, and I know that all of them was removed, but still it could be somewhere. Some of that still under the pond, which is easily seepage and leakage could penetrate that. Do you have any environmental protection, environmental monitoring, borehole in different locations that monitor the quality of the seepage and leakage, and what is the effects of that on the area?
Dave, do you have an answer to that?
No, I think we probably have to take it on notice.
I would say that the environmental analysis that would have occurred as part of the planning and the delivery of the civil works should take that into account. Now, we will take it on notice just to confirm, but I would be very surprised if that wasn't in the processes that have occurred. So usually the environmental analysis that occurs would require what you need to do. If that analysis implied that you needed to have boreholes to ensure that we were measuring appropriately, then yes, it would occur. I'm not across it at the moment, so I have to take that on notice.
Okay, we'll take a question. Stephen Booth has a question that was received online. If we could pass the microphone down to him, John. Thank you.
All right, so this would be in relation to traffic complaints. Do you need to provide number plate details? Number plate details are good. More importantly, if you have a complaint about traffic and it's about a specific time or a specific place, then obviously police can't be everywhere at once. The more information you give us, the more we can tailor our activities to make the most of what we do have and be in the right place at the right time. The other thing I'll say about number plates is traffic enforcement and catching people out is all well and good, but the real silver bullet for road safety is education. Right? What we want to do is teach people to do the right thing so we don't have to catch them doing the wrong thing. And you'll notice we don't talk about seatbelts anymore because people wear seatbelts. We don't find people out there not wearing their seatbelt anymore. We want that to be for every traffic incident out there. We want people to not use their mobile phones deliberately without thinking about it, or all those different things. So if you provide us the details of a vehicle, we can go see that driver and say, mate, you're doing the wrong thing. We can stop you from doing the wrong thing or teach you to do the right thing so nothing horrible happens later on. All right?
Thanks, Stephen. George, you've got a question there, so.
I've got an online question in relation to the community hall at Coombs Community Hub. The question is why it's private. Why is it a privately owned hall, and what do we pay our rates and taxes for? My answer to that is if land is zoned community facilities, it does not necessarily mean that the land has to be owned or operated by government. Many of the community facility sites are owned and operated by private operators, such as in this case. It's quite common practice for to supplement publicly available facilities by requiring private ventures to provide such a facility. And a facility of this nature can be made available for a range of community users. We find typical users would be things like yoga classes, dance classes, cultural groups, and religious groups.
Thanks, George. We'll head down to Stephen and we'll finish with you, David.
I just had a question about, similar to the question about toilets, about bins in parks. Again, we do have bins in the larger high-use parks. We do encourage people to take their waste home with them, which is the expectation in many areas. And it also has the advantage that people can then recycle, because we obviously don't always have recycling facilities in our parks. If there's a specific park that you, the person, I think it was on Facebook, has a concern about, and there's a case for a bin for whatever reason, I'm happy to hear it, so please get in touch. There's also a suggestion about reseeding areas to maintain grass cover, and again, that's something that we would only be able to do in a situation where we had a decent rainfall season, unless we have irrigation. So it is a good suggestion, and like we do with replacing shrub beds and plants in parks, we do need to wait and generally until we've got a decent season. Otherwise, it's just it's a waste of time trying to grow things in the middle of a drought.
Thanks, Stephen. We do have a question from the floor.
This is a question for City Services. You mentioned that you are praying for rain. That is most encouraging, but without wishing to offend religious sensibilities, I'd like to suggest that a little bit more than that is needed. There is a great need for grounds maintenance everywhere in these two suburbs. I live 3 minutes walk away. The tallest weeds I passed in that short walk were taller than I am. And it makes you weep to see this when you look at the landscaping that went in. I make a plea for landscaping and subsequent maintenance to be matched. Having made that point, you did encourage us to use Fix My Street. I have been using Fix My Street in order to get the lighting fixed in the subway that is 1 minute's walk from where we are now. This has been a total failure. I prefer not to use that subway at night because half the lights have not been working for more than 2 years, and those that are working are choked with dead insect corpses. Now, my question is this: when Fix My Street fails, what is the next course of action? Your advice, please.
Yeah, I'm happy to be contacted directly, and I'll take that up. That's absolutely fine. I mean, Fix My Street is a way of the citizens making a request, but it's also our way of tracking the request. And obviously, if people, I'm not sure if you provide your contact details on the request. If you do, that makes it easy for us to great, that's good. And I'm happy to follow up after with your specific inquiries about the weeds and the street lights. But okay, right, okay. Well, I'm happy to follow it up again. I'm not sure what the background is to it. Street lights are something that my colleagues in Roads ACT would be responsible for, so I'm happy to take that up with them offline. And as for the weeds, again, I'm happy to hear what you've got to say about weeds. I mean, we do have the seasonal conditions this year are pretty good in terms of we don't have really long grass everywhere like we might have had in previous years, but I acknowledge that there can still be weed issues out there that, yeah, and I'm not sure what patch of land it's on, whether it's our land or whatever, but we can work that out afterwards. Yep, no worries. Thank you for that. Yep.
Thank you, Steve.
Sure. Thank you.
And now if we could pass the microphone down, we have an online question with David.
Yep, an online question from home. Any updates on Section 29 right, the community facility site? So I assume this is the site, so if I can confirm my bearings, I know it's the one. Yep, thank you, George. Yeah, so that's the one, we know that public housing was going, the site got subdivided, public housing was going onto it. The site adjacent to that is currently on the ACT Government's indicative land release program for release this financial year. That is something that we're working through with John, the board and the Minister on the most appropriate way to release that site. There has been some community needs analysis done on that site for the public housing, so we'll be looking at that information and then determining an appropriate release method for that.
Thank you, David. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you all for your presence here in the hall this evening, and to those watching online. I now invite our presenters to make their way to their stalls where they will be available for further discussions. That concludes the formal part of our evening. Thank you and good night.